You can start if you want.
Okay. Okay, welcome everybody to, let's see, today is December 15th, 2021. You are watching the Beverly School Committee's Finance and Facilities Standing Subcommittee. We are meeting today in a hybrid fashion, although I don't think anyone is logged into our Zoom hybrid. So, but we are recording, and in June of 2021, the governor signed Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, and amongst other things, this bill allows public bodies to continue to hold meetings remotely until April 1st, 2022. This specifically suspends the need for a quorum and the chair to be physically present, and asks our body to use technical methods to allow safe public access. We would encourage viewers to utilize BevCam streaming options this evening if possible, although we're working through some issues on that right now. And Beverly, we also note that Beverly has prior approval for remote participation through a chair and quorum, though the chair and quorum is physically present this evening. Okay, so I think that's all I need to say about meeting remotely. We have a decent number of things to do this evening. I am, Ray, I'm going to share my screen, I think, and whether it can be seen on the big screen or not, it looks like we're figuring out our technical difficulties. Yeah? Yay! All right. We'll make sure we invite Robert to all our meetings. Okay, so the first thing on our agenda is meeting. Oh, that's really small font, huh? You guys hold on a minute. I'll increase it. Here we go. Are the approval of the meeting minutes from our last meeting, November 17th. Do I have a motion to approve? Thank you, Mr. Manzo. A second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Coelho. Does anybody have any comments? I can throw those up on the screen for a second. The font's really small, but look, we can scroll through them. Anybody have any comments or in particular corrections on the meeting minutes?
Under transfers, it says there were transfers brought forward this month, and there were no.
Right, we did not vote on any because there were not any transfers, correct. And I guess I should have said, even though we don't have anybody remote, I should have said we have almost everyone in attendance. We're missing our current member of the public, Mr. Silva. Other than that, we have our other two members of the public in person and the other two members of the school committee here. We have our wonderful IT person running our Zoom meeting, Dr. Chiroczek, Jean, the bean counter, finance officer, and our recording secretary. Okay, so that's who's in the room in case BevCam doesn't pan out and catch y'all. Okay, any other corrections on the meeting minutes? Robert, thank you so much. Okay, so there's a motion on the table. All those in favor of approving the meeting minutes with the one correction? 5-0, that passes 5-0. Okay, just like remember that number. Okay, meeting minute done. The next thing is a B&G update. Again, this report was sent to everybody in the, for time purposes. We just kind of review this. Does anybody have any questions about the B&G report, this month's B&G report? Okay, seeing no hands, we'll go right along. Next is expected to be an update, but I am going to ask the committee. Jean has some wonderful information to present to us this evening, and I'd like us to be totally engrossed in that conversation and go as far and as close to 7:30 as possible in that conversation. And so to help facilitate that, I would like to go out of order on the agenda, and I'd like to take care of the two things that require votes this evening. So I guess technically I'm looking for a motion to go out of order on the agenda.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Ducharme.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. We're going to jump down to transfers. Jean, do you want to talk about this transfer, please?
Yes, what I have brought forward here is transfer number 243, and this is a transfers for the most recent approval of the Unit C contract, moving funds from the reserve for negotiations into the paraprofessional lines, and I did have one salary line that I had not done previously for high school principals coming out of that reserve for negotiations. This will be zeroing out our reserve for negotiations.
Okay, does anybody have any questions for Jean on this transfer number 243? Okay, I'm looking for a motion. I should have done that first, apologies. Or I'm more than disheveled today. I need a motion to approve this transfer.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Ducharme.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Manzo. Any questions for Ms. Sherburne? Okay, all those in favor?
Actually, I do
Oh, yeah,
have one,
okay.
and
Woo!
actually Karen has one too, right? No? Oh, so this is to settle the Unit C. Are we expecting more of these, hoping for more of these sort of transfers as other unions also come? Or this is done, we're done?
This is all done. All of the negotiations have been, all the units have been satisfied
Oh, good job.
and ratified and all
Nice.
of that.
All the fides.
We missed you so much.
Well, oddly enough, I missed being there. so
There you go.
Congratulations to everyone.
Thank you.
Ms. Robinson, did you have a question or a comment? No? No? Okay. All right, so all those in favor? 5-0. Okay, so there's our transfers, and our next is a gifts to schools. Ms. Sherburne, would you like to speak to this one? I see, let me increase the font so everybody else can also see it.
Sure. The gifts to schools that we're bringing forth are the gifts that we received in the month of November, and they total $2,666.94, and it went into various school accounts.
Okay, so, all right, so I'm looking for a motion before we start any possible discussion.
So moved. Second.
Thank you, Ms. Ducharme and Ms. Robinson. It is up on the screen in case people wanted to see. I can't fit at this size font to the total, but the total is $2666.94, and it's across district-wide, North Beverly, Hannah, and the middle school, various amounts. Does anybody have any questions about any of these items? Otherwise, we're going to vote on my most favorite thing, which is who would ever say no to free money. Okay, there's a motion on the table. All those in favor? That passes 5-0. Fantastic. So those are the things we had to vote on.
We have one more.
We have one more.
The grant acceptance, it's in the Word document.
I boogered that up. Hold, please. Let's try not to look at all of the things that are open on my screen, okay? Okay, so we have, so Ms. Sherburne, would you like to talk about this one too?
Sure. So the DESE has announced that there's availability of reimbursement funds for school districts for operating the pandemic EBT program. And so what they did is they gave some funding to the school districts for everything that we had to do for people to be able to get the EBTs during the pandemic. And the amount that Beverly received was $4,912. And the one of the areas that you could use is to offset a salary that worked on student data from our that we submit into the Department of Ed. So therefore, that's what we'll do, is a salary transfer from our appropriated budget to this grant to use up the funds, which have already been received.
Okay, so I'm looking for a motion to accept this grant in the amount of $4,912.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Manzo and Ms. Robinson. Are there any questions for Ms. Sherburne on this particular grant? All those in favor? That passes 5-0. Okay, so really now we think that those are all the things we had to vote on. And now we're going to go to your update. Yes, Ms. Sherburne?
Yes, please.
And I'm going to do my best to be good about switching when it's time to switch. It's a very nice first slide. Thank you.
Yes, happy holidays. So my administration update, the next slide, we're going to be talking about the FY23 budget calendar. So as you know, this is the time where we start talking about the next fiscal year, FY23, during finance and facilities. So we're going to give you a budget calendar and talk about what's been going on. And then Dr. Chiroczek will be taking the budget into all the committee of the wholes from now on until the budget passes. These other items that we're going to be talking about is ESSER funding. And the third thing is the financial reports where you have already accepted the grant and the budget transfer. So during the slide, see where it says FY23 budget process? That's a link. Hopefully you can get out to that. But that's what I'm going to be talking about. But this slide is telling you that we have developed the budget calendar and budget discussions have been ongoing. And I did put it on the next slide there. And it's kind of small, but I printed it out so I could read it. So the first thing is that we started in November of 2021 to work on the budget calendar development for the FY23 budget. In the month of December, from the 6th to the 17th, we have been having discussions with the school committee members and the superintendent and myself. Between the 13th and the 17th, we have been having discussions with the principals and department heads, and that will be ongoing. On the 15th today, we will have the budget calendar, and we will be having a committee of the whole budget discussion where we are getting priorities from all the stakeholders. In January, we will have another budget committee of the whole budget discussion, and that's the month when we the governor's proposed state budget is hopefully will be released. In February and March, we will continue having various budget discussions. In April, that's when the House Ways and Means will release their copy version of the budget, the state's budget, and then we would have a committee of the whole. In May, that's when the Senate Ways and Means will release their version. We'll have to put an ad in the paper on May 3rd, talking about when we're going to be having our public hearing. Superintendent will have the annual budget ready for release on the 9th. Right now, we have the school committee public hearing scheduled for the 11th. And then I put down here that the committee of the whole budget discussions and vote on the budget would be on the 25th. If we get too close to a time crunch on when the mayor plans to submit to the city council, we may be adding a meeting in between the 11th and the 25th if we need it, if it's necessary. But right now, we're planning on the 25th. And then in June, we'll have discussions with the city council, and then the state will, hopefully, by the end of June, finalize their state budget, and then ours will get finalized. And then the next fiscal year starts on July 1st. And then any final adjustments for the current year that we're in happens on July 9th, the week after the. So that's our budget development. Dr. Chiroczek, I think, has met with most of you, if not all of you. A couple more. And then really what happens here is we kind of let go of it from the finance and facilities aspect and goes into all the committee of the whole meetings.
Okay, so I think I want to say two things here before we go to your next slide. Well, if anybody has any questions, we can do that too. But what I want to point out is for those members of the public who might want to mark their calendars, May 11th is the public hearing on the budget. And what I will say is that, if you wish to try to be involved, that day is, although we love to hear from you, we probably need to hear from you sooner than that, right? So if there's something you feel strongly about as a member of the public, you should be talking to your school committee members ASAP so that they can try to represent your concerns in the budget process as we go through all these other dates on the calendar. Okay, having said that, anyone else on the table have any comments or questions on this particular part of Doctor? I'm giving you a promotion.
Wow.
Okay. Jean's presentation.
Okay.
Scrolling.
So as you recall, we brought forward the grant funding, grant acceptance previously this year because the grants are allocations, entitlements that you receive. I did get your approval for the grants, ESSER 1, 2, and 3 already, but this is to give a little more depth of volume of what is in each of the ESSER grants. So ESSER 1 is considered DESE's grant number 113, and Beverly received $555,939, and the funding is to be used in FY21, which we did some, and into FY22. At the end of FY22 in June, we are no longer can access these funds, and we will have used all of the funds in that time period for ESSER 1. What I've done here is given the grant, so when you get Department of Ed grants, they have categories, which is administrative salaries, instructional salaries, so on and so forth. So what I did here is I bullet pointed any of the categories that are in the grant that actually had funding associated with it. So the first thing is the administrative salaries. We had allocated $117,000, and we're using that for FY22 for the Director of Opportunity, Access, and Equity salary. And then instructional salaries is $90,000, and we're using that in FY22 for 1.5 adjustment counselor salaries. And that's what we did hire is 1.5 additional. And then the support salary is $216,000, and we're planning on using that in FY22 for additional bus monitors, data and tech support, and a teacher fellow. And then we have stipends, which we had for $36,109. And we spent that in FY21 on accelerated learning programs that happened over the summer. Then there's a category called Fringe Benefits, and that's $38,630, and that would be fringe on any positions. So we have to pay mass teachers retirement, 9% for any salaries that are covered by a federal grant, which this is, and health insurance. And it would be a portion of health insurance on people that are associated with this grant. You could not put more health insurance on than staff charged to a grant. Excuse me. Supplies and materials, we allocated $57,700. In FY21, we spent $43,411, and it was spent on remote learning, outdoor classrooms, building changes, technology, disinfectant, sanitizing, and PPE. And in FY22, we'll be using it on instructional supplies. And the last item is other costs for $500, and we use that in FY21 for transportation, during the, for the accelerated learning programs. So I'm looking at this grant. We are watching it for this year. I do not see much change from what we originally wrote it for. I did have a member of the committee ask about like what happens when the grant funding is over. And as you'll see when I get into the next phase, which is ESSER 2, the Director of Opportunities salary will be coming out of that. I'll be talking about that in a minute. But what we did when we planned these, after meeting with the various stakeholders, we have it planned so that it wasn't, so we don't want to have a cliff at the end of, after the third year is over, that, well, what do we do now? So a lot of it's phasing in. So we may have some teachers that we've hired to reduce class sizes, and then we're going to find if the class sizes level out, then we may have one less. And then what it'll be is at the end of the period, we'll have to see what do we still need. I'll take a breath here, and if there's anything Dr. Chiroczek wants to add, but I think I've hit it.
If anybody has any questions,
All right, I'm looking around the room to see if anybody else has any questions before I call on myself. Try to be semi-polite about that. When you have on any one of these items that it was FY22, that means we haven't spent it yet. It's going to be spent for next school year.
FY22 is this current fiscal year, this school year.
All right.
So if I
when-
said 21, it was spent before June 30th of last year.
Okay.
And it will be spent by June 30th. We have to actually spend it by June 30th, do our final reports. If there's any funds that we do not spend, we would have to send those funds back to the state to reallocate out. But believe me, there won't be any of those.
And if we add up all the numbers on this sheet, we get the amount.
Yes, if we add up
As
all
a-
the on
And it
this
so
sheet.
happens that you reported to us in the categories that the grant made you file them in.
Yes, yep, so these are the categories. We can always do an amendment to a grant if we find that there is a need that comes up, a greater need that we didn't plan for. But as I've already said in this ESSER 1, I've already looked at it, I've earmarked it, these categories, and we have salaries on the staffing pattern are going to be charged to this. So I do not see much of a shift in here at all.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
The next,
Oh, sorry, Ms. Robinson.
just one other question. So when all the ESSER funding ends, is there any areas that we're concerned about being able to fund it all?
I'm going to say at this moment, I do not think so, but I don't think we would know that at this time. How's that for the answer? So we are planning. So if we have, say, 3 teachers we put on, we may be planning in the second ESSER that we would have 2 and then the third 1. But again, as we go through, not knowing, what the student needs are right now, we're going to get through this year, and then we may have to change our thought process if we need more, social emotional or something. We might, and we can switch that up. We just have to do an amendment. So whenever you get one of these grants, they tell you you can have a certain dollar amount, and then you have to write the grant, then they review the grant, and then they can come back and ask further questions. So I think when Dr. Flaherty wrote this grant with Dr. Chiroczek, there was some questions that came from the DESE they had to answer, and they had to vet it, I guess is the best thing. So right now, there's nothing that we're saying, oh my gosh, we're going to need this. But I think when we're in next fiscal year, that's when we're going to see if we're finding what we were able to do, did that help us with our issues because of the pandemic. The next one I have is called ESSER 2, and that's grant fund number 115 with the DESE. And this one we received $2,119,947. And this funding is for this fiscal year, FY22, through next fiscal year, FY23, the budget that we're going to be working on. The categories here are very similar to the same ones you saw previously. Administrative salaries, we have $217,000. And this is where we have brought on a director of English language education that was already brought forth. And so that person's salary is coming out of this grant for this year. And the Director of Opportunity that we're paying for this year out of ESSER 1 will be paid out of ESSER 2. Instructional salaries is $732,000, and we're using that in FY22 and FY23 in the following categories. We have classroom teachers, instructional coach, reading coaches, and an outreach counselor. And it varies in that area to say how many are in this year and how many are in next year, but it's to cover the 2 years. With the knowledge that we do have ESSER 3 funding, if somebody was only covered out of, if we're introducing something in FY23, it would go for the next year. Support staff salaries is $154,000, and that's using for FY23 paraprofessionals. So that's where when we plan our FY23 budget, we will have additional support for paraprofessionals already grant funded. Stipends is $144,000, and we're using that for FY22 and FY23, and that's kind of for the same purposes that we spoke earlier for accelerated learning process, programs, summer,
Academies.
and that type. And I'm not sure if there's any professional development on there. I'm thinking there was some professional
I
development.
think some that's related to the new curriculums that were
New
adopted.
curriculum. And then fringe benefits, $405,410, again, using that in FY22 and 23. Health insurance for employees that are covered under this grant, and MTRS for any salaries that are paid out of this grant. Contracted services is $84,000. We're using that in FY22 and FY23, and that's for professional development. Dr. Chiroczek just spoke about the curriculum. So when I'm talking about supplies, it's going to be talking about ELA and math. It would be professional development for that, and instructional services to help the students from the pandemic. The next category is supplies. That's $303,537. We're going to be using that in FY22 and FY23. We're piloting a K-12 ELA program, curriculum program, and a math program that's going to be for FY23. Instructional materials for the summer and after-school programs. And that was something that was very, promising this past summer of how many programs that we were actually had. If you recall, the buildings and grounds people were complaining that we were using the schools, they couldn't get in to clean, but it's a good thing that we do actually have had the programs, and we'll be able to continue in the next year. And then COVID-related improvements to facilities. And that would be like the tents and the other areas that we had to do to be able to teach the students. Travel is $20,000. We're using that in FY22 and FY23. And travel, when you're looking at the DESE grant, that's really talking about like conference travel, not like travel.
Aruba.
Aruba. It is talking about professional development, which could be a course here or there, or it could be a conference that somebody's going to.
Or it could be somebody coming in to provide professional development, and we have to pay their travel expenses to get them here, too.
Right.
It can be on the reverse.
And then the other cost is $60,000, and we're using that in FY22 and 23, and that's for student transportation for the summer and after-school programs. And we were talking about additionally, I don't think I put it on here, is we were talking about homeless travel, and it would be pretty much not sped travel.
Right.
So that's what ESSER 2 is about. If anybody has any specific questions on ESSER 2.
I'm looking around the room. Any hands, any questions? ESSER 2 questions? Rolling on to ESSER 3, Jean.
All right. Excuse me. So ESSER 3. So ESSER 3 is currently being reviewed by the Grants Management at Department of Education. We have submitted it. It's grant fund number 119. And this grant is for $4,741,978. And the grant funding is for this year, FY '22, once upon approval through FY '24. The areas of, that we have submitted for review is instructional salaries of $1,318,000. And we're hoping to be using portion of it for FY '22 through FY '24. And the categories would be for classroom teachers, the instructional coordinator ELL, that was the ELL person that we're paying for in the ESSER 2, the second year in ESSER 3, certified specialist teachers, nurses, and counselors. So when we think about that, is once it gets approved, then if we need to bring on additional nurses for any kind of testing or anything like that, we could be utilizing this funding. Majority of it, by the time it gets approved, is going to be in the FY '23 and '24, because we've already earmarked ESSER 1 and 2 for those years. The support salaries is $205,000. We're using that in FY '23 and '24 for paraprofessionals and tech support, or I want to say any kind of support, not teacher salaries. Stipends is $215,000. We're using that in FY '23 and '24 for the summer and after-school programs throughout the year and throughout the district. And then fringe benefits, again, is $578,620, is for health insurance and MTRS. So as the number of salaries increases in, by the number of people that we're hiring, more has to go to MTRS, hence why that is higher than the other years. Contractual services is $440,000, and we're planning on using that in FY '23 and '24 for professional development and instructional services. Supplies is $690,000. We're planning on using that in FY '23 and '24 for the ELA curriculum materials, testing and assessment, translations, and for services that to help with working with students and their families. And then other costs is $1,267,358, and we plan on using that in FY '22 to '24 for network upgrades, I think at the elementary schools, and student summer and homeless transportation, and a high school makerspace. We're talking about adding classroom space at the high school if possible, and the air quality improvements. And these things all have to get approved by the DESE first before we can move forward with our plan. But we have to have them vet what our intentions are. And they would not be able to do any site improvements. It would be just a building if it's like a modular type building. They'd be able to pay. So we'd have to make sure we'd have whatever our plan is, that we'd have funding for the other aspects of it. Equipment is $28,000, and we're hoping to get a district transportation vehicle, like a van of some sort, and that would be for purposes of helping with outreach to the families, student transportation if we need to, that's not handled by our own transportation department. And that's what that grant is about. I did want to say a little, I meant to say this before and I forgot. But when the Department of Ed issues any of the ESSER funding, they always give you an area of what fund use is for. And you have to make sure that you allocate your grant in accordance with what they're saying. And they'll give you some priorities. All of our items that we have in all of the 3 ESSER grants have met the priorities, hence they wouldn't have been approved. But one thing that with the ESSER 3 is that you're required to reserve 20% of the district's ESSER 3 funds to address lost instructional time through implementation of evidence-based interventions and ensure those interventions respond to students' social, emotional, and academic needs. So what they do is there's 12 items that I don't think I need to go through all of them one by one of what it is, but we need, when we write the grants, we make sure that our ideas are, first of all, what we need in the district, obviously, and then the priorities that the Department of Ed is requiring. And then it goes to a grant review that really looks at every aspect of it, and sometimes they come back and ask us to, elaborate a little bit more. Sometimes they say, well, we'd like you to, put it in a different light. So it might be just a little bit different, but, and so far right now we're resubmitting some additional information for them that they've requested.
Okay, I'm looking around the room. First thing, thank you, Jean. Looking around the room if anybody has questions for Jean before I call on myself. All right, so working backwards, Jean, can you please repeat what is the percentage that the grant specifies has to be spent on interventions?
On this, it would be 20%.
20, right? Okay, and would someone who watched this presentation necessarily be able to, like, one-to-one map that 20% onto any one of these categories? Or, like, would we say, for instance, the salary of the counselor gets in that category?
So, and I'm not positive because Dot did the writing, but I believe that they may not see it here, but when we submit the budget, we have to check off which categories we are saying are what we're aligning to that. We far exceeded 20% in what we chose to use our grant for, but we specify that in the budget page of a submission that we do.
Right, so that's
Yeah.
my point.
Yeah.
Okay, so we would not necessarily see it on this page. Okay, can we visit again quickly what are some examples of instructional services underneath contractual services? When we spend on contractual services,
Yeah.
there is a sub-item called instructional services.
So I think that for example, one of the categories would be if we were to contractually engage with a virtual tutoring support for homework for after hours, right? So one of the things we've explored is an opportunity to provide access for our students after hours, where they would access virtual supports for their academics. I know that Dot and Andre.
Which program
Right. That would be an example. Another example is if we were to have a
Professional
contract to bring
development.
in, I'm sorry?
professional development can fall under contracted services.
No, but she's talking about the instructional services specifically.
Yeah,
under that.
like our new curriculum.
Yep, that was in a separate line, though. That's the, I think one of the other things we were talking about was Think Kids, to bring in a program, Think Kids, that fell under that category of instructional services, right? So a program that we contract someone outside to come in and work with us. What is his name?
He's out of Mass General, but
Yeah.
right now his name is escaping me.
I don't have the name off the top of my head, but
I'm not
those kinds of
really
things.
good
So
with
it would
names
be that we
anyway.
have, we contract to have.
Stuart Avalon.
Stuart Avalon. So we contract with an agency to come in that supports some of the services that we're providing within the schools.
Fantastic. And my last question before I look around the room again. Actually, I'll pause here. Does anybody else want to turn? I'm pigletting all the airtime. Okay, cool. In both of in ESSER 1 and ESSER 2, we saw quote unquote Dr. Morgan, and I don't see Dr. Morgan in ESSER 3.
So the purpose of everything that we do, we have sort of this matrix that's set up, and we're trying to absorb things into the appropriated budget if in fact they're here. So you'll notice that some things slip off of ESSER and into the appropriated budget, but we're doing that in a way that we're not overwhelming the budget at one time. So that is where that will fall into an appropriated budget by that point.
Fantastic. That is the best answer. We saved it for last. And now I have to say that, like, boom, boom, in my vision is like, I'm seeing double vision with the masks over there. Very, very, very nice. Okay.
Twinning.
Jean, that is we did this one. We voted on this, right?
Yep, so that was the end of my ESSER, on my presentation. And then I just have the revenues and expenses, if anybody wants to talk about those two.
Do we, so, my body, my fellow FNF members, does anybody have any questions on either the revenue report? We already did transfers and we already did gifts to schools. On either the revenue report or the expense report.
I did want to add that with the revenues, I have been talking to the transportation department and the athletic department on our estimates for the remainder. And right now, even though we have not had as many sports teams in some of the sports, they feel that we are on target for what we projected for revenues coming in. By all means, when we get through this next season and into our final season, if we do not have that, then we make sure that we're able to cover the expenses for the athletic program. And transportation, I do believe that it is, my estimate is a little high, but I do have the funds in the revolving. So if that 45,900 is not something that actually comes to fruition, that we're going to actually receive all of that, meaning that we have that many riders, I would be adding to that second column the difference. And I do have that in my revolving, in our revolving account. Everything else is pretty much coming in. One pleasant surprise is that we did have a lot more non-resident tuitions, SEVIS coming in. Betty has received a lot of students that have wanted to come in just for a half a semester, or one semester, half a year. So we've seen on that. I also will be receiving funds from now to the end of the year for any students that want to come next year. So that's another area. Yes, so I think that's pretty much everything is coming in on our target. I asked about the preschool, and the preschool does have a growing, we are receiving 154,000 over and above what we budgeted, but what we budgeted has been just a portion of a teacher's salary, not what we actually would be coming in. And that allows us to have funds for the program itself. So there, as you recall, in the appropriated budget, it's a little cost center that's called MK from McEwen. They'd be able to get more supplies if from the revolving account to offset where they receive the tuitions from the students. The building rental, that one is probably going to have to dip into the revolving account, but we do have the funds there because really pretty much we're only renting to the YMCA, and we have a church at the Ayers School currently, but we're not bringing in an awful lot of outside vendors to use, outside personnel to use our auditoriums just because of COVID. But we are bringing in the sports, but as you recall, when we did our fee structure for, the basketball and cheerleading and those, if they have a majority of the students are from Beverly, participants are from Beverly, then really all they do is they end up paying for the custodial services, not for the building. So I'm not worried about anything in this category.
Oh, that's like the best news as well. Does anybody, all right, so the revenues are up on the screen. Well, we're talking about revenues right now. I have not shared the bazillion page expense report, but I can if anybody has any questions on that. I'm looking at you, Mr. Manzo.
The only question I had for the expense report, Jean, and this one we talk about every month, is the subline. And I'm looking at it, and it looks rather flush, and I'd hate to jinx ourselves by asking, is it Is there too much money there? Are we not utilizing as many subs as we used to? I mean, what's the reason why there's more than we usually expect?
So that is one area that I'm looking at, to be able to cover any shortfalls that we have in the budget. So I would say that we have it budgeted appropriately, but I am going to say that it is difficult to get substitutes in at this time. And we're more using internal people, paraprofessionals to cover some areas when we can. So we're not using it as much. I am going to say that we are going to see some going on because I do know of a few babies coming into this world pretty soon. So what happens for the first 8 weeks, the teachers they continually get paid, and we have to get a sub. So therefore, versus if somebody takes after 8 weeks, they're unpaid, and it kind of is a cost neutral sometimes. But I have seen that that's coming. And what we don't really know is where are we at that point, So, but that is one area that I'm looking at, does look pretty good right now.
Right.
So what we would do.
But not for the right reasons. It sounds like we need subs, but people
Right.
aren't interested in substitutes.
In subs, yep. I'm going to say that that's a difficult thing on every aspect of hiring, and if you go anywhere, just to be able to try to get some people in. But I have noticed that we were having a hard time on, filling our paraprofessionals positions in September, October, and I'm noticing that. So I have a staffing pattern, and if I have a green line across it, that means an opening, and there was a lot of green. And now I'm noticing it's closing up. Some of the schools are still having difficulty, but I'm seeing in the elementary aspect, it does look pretty good that they're able to get people, and I'm seeing more and more. Plus,
Middle school, too. Middle school's done some hiring, too.
and I am, that's one good thing is that we did just renegotiate the Unit C contract, so maybe that will entice some people to come because it's a little bit higher paying than it was before. But yes, that is one area that I'm looking at and that we'll assess at, say in a month or two, we'll look at it to see if we really think we'll have substantial savings. What can we do for one-time purchases to use the funds for that? Because we still want to have it budgeted for next year, because that is the norm.
Right. Is there any talk about maybe increasing the rate of pay for substitutes to try to get more in, or you've already gone to that well?
I think we've already done that, and we're comparable to other districts in the area. I don't think that that's it. I mean, one thing that we have been toying with, discussing, I'll say, is that, do we want to see if we can hire like a building-based sub, somebody that's here. When you do that, you're now adding a health insurance cost in.
Full-time
So,
position,
yeah, so that's one idea that we've been floating around when we've started our discussions of FY '23 budgeting. And that's, one area that when we see something that there's a high need next year for something, I'm going to say like a special education teacher. One thing is when a principal's been coming in saying, I really need this now and I need it next year, we're looking to say, okay, let's move forward now because we do know we have that little funding. Let's do it, and then we can build into next year's budget.
Thank you.
Karen?
Thank you. Just jumping off of Mr. Manzo's question, I don't expect you to have this answer now, but I wonder how much more money we're spending to have paras or teachers substitute for classes or part of the day. It's just something that I think would be interesting to look into if.
Yes, I probably can have the payroll department run me something. What happens is it does come out of that account, so I could actually look and see how much is paid on a paraprofessional employee. They do receive $12 to $14, depends if they're licensed or not, a differential for each hour. So I would say, we are utilizing that, but of course we have to make sure that we fulfill the students. We can't take a one-to-one to do that, obviously.
And our teachers filling in as substitutes?
Yes, I do believe at the high school, Betty has people that are in, whenever they have a,
Free block.
what do you call it, when they have a class that, a duty, a duty period, that they go in. Sometimes people are giving up their prep time to get paid to cover a class. So we're doing everything we need to do and keeping our fingers crossed and that, that we don't have an uptick that is a problem, I mean, that's what we're trying to do, but I can figure out how much is in that area that we've been paying out.
Thank you.
All right, I'm looking around the room. Does anybody else have any questions or concerns about either the expenses or the revenues? All right, so before, I brought like a show and tell today. One year ago today, this meeting was via Zoom, and we were, in our serious lockdown, and I wore this mask to try to bring us all a little joy and get everybody to snicker a little, and so I have commented, Jean, I love your mask. Dr. Flaherty, your mask is very nice. And I think that I just want to say that what a heck of a year it's been, and especially for the people who are in this room as volunteers. It is incredible. Take this opportunity to thank you guys yet again for your donation of time and your service, and even the people at this table who get paid to be here. I think nobody expected, I don't think a year ago we expected to be locked down. At that time, I don't think we expected to still be wearing our masks. But, if we, instead of focusing on the negatives, if we focus on the positive, that at least we're here in person this year versus last year when we were all behind our screens and really locked in our houses together. And I felt like I had to do this to make you all laugh. So I just wanted to say that, take a moment to say that. And now I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Coelho. All those in favor? That passes 5-0. We got a couple-minute break before we start our next meeting. Thank you. Thanks, BevCam. Thanks, Kim.
Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to the Beverly School Committee Committee of the Whole meeting. Tonight is Wednesday, December 15th. We are meeting in a hybrid fashion using a remote meeting application provided at no cost to our district with captioning. This allows for remote participation and for public access to the open portions of our meeting. We are also recording tonight and being broadcast and streamed by BevCam. Thank you, BevCam. On June 16, 2021, the Governor signed Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, which, among other things, allows public bodies to continue holding meetings remotely until April 1, 2022. This act specifically suspends the need for a quorum and the chair to physically be present and asks our body to use technical methods to allow for safe public access. We would encourage viewers to utilize the BevCam streaming options this evening if possible. And as a note, Beverly has prior approval for remote participation, although past the April 1st deadline, the chair and a quorum would be physically present. Tonight is a committee of the whole meeting, which means we do not have an agenda item for addressing the body during our meeting. Also, on our agenda tonight, we have a brief executive session planned. However, we will not return to open session after that. This means we'll be inviting the non-committee members to go to the waiting room or just leave the facilities. Joining us today are members of the school committee, various members of the district administration and leadership teams, and I will conduct a full roll call for the record, since the meeting application sometimes does not display all participants. Please remember that any audio and video that you supply on this platform will become part of the meeting record. As such, please use your mute functionality to prevent background noises. Now for the roll call. Present in person, we have Mayor Cahill.
Here.
Ms. Kimberly Coelho.
Here.
Ms. Karen Robinson.
Here.
Mr. John Milady.
Here.
Ms. Lorinda Visnick.
Here.
And Ms. Rachel Abel. We also have Dr. Sue Chiroczek,
Here.
Dr. Dorothy Flaherty,
Here.
Ms. Jean Sherburne,
Here.
Dr. Andre Morgan,
Here.
and participating remotely, we have Ms. Erin Brown. Oh, I have a list. I have an order here. Sorry. Yeah, I'll get there. Ms. Brown, we didn't quite hear you, but I saw that you came on and off mute. Okay. And let's see. So Miss Bethany Splansky is here in person. Miss Jody Elder is remote. We're not hearing the sound on this TV. That's what I'm figuring out. If you don't mind bumping the volume up on the television, I heard a very faint.
And it's
Miss
done by
Elder.
this now. Let's see. Probably this thing. Can she try that again? Jody?
Yes. Miss Elder, could you speak again? We're reading you on closed captioning, but we're troubleshooting the volume. We've also just been joined remotely by Dr. Kenan McKenzie. Give us a thumbs up because we're not hearing volume at the moment. Dr. McKenzie?
Can they hear, they can hear you, right?
They're responding to us, but we can't hear them.
Maybe there's a mute button here.
While we troubleshoot, we have our recording secretary, Ms. Karan. Okay. Yep. I think that's who is with us this evening.
Maybe that's it. Can Miss Elder try again or somebody?
Okay. Ms. Elder, could you try speaking one more time for us?
Oh, I don't know. The speaker is on. And the volume.
Oh, we can see you. Do you know American Sign Language? That would be helpful. Okay. Thank you, Dr. McKenzie. Yeah, we can see you.
Yeah, I don't know, I'm sorry.
Yeah, what about your volume on your computer, Kim?
Let me try that.
Okay,
All the
It's-
way.
up, okay. Dr. McKenzie, one more time, humor us, see if you can,
I mean, I'm surprised with just,
yeah. I can very faintly hear you somewhere. Okay. We're going to continue to troubleshoot that. In the meantime, our first order of business is Pledge of Allegiance. And Mr. Milady, I think I made you do it at the regular meeting, but since this is the last one more time. Encore.
I pledge allegiance to
the
the
flag
flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Let's see. While we're still working on this troubleshooting, we have the approval of the meeting records. I think, Dr. McKenzie, you can hear us, so we'll ask for, this kind of vote. And if you have anything that you wanted to correct, just give us a hand raise. Okay. So we have the meeting records from Committee of the Whole, November 17th, 2021. I'm looking for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Thank you, Mayor Cahill. Thank you, Ms. Visnick. Were there any corrections, additions, or edits? I'm not seeing any. All those, we have one remote participant, so we will do a quick roll call. Alphabetically, Mayor Cahill,
Yes.
Kimberly Coelho,
Yes.
Kenan McKenzie, yes, and John Milady,
Yes.
Karen Robinson,
Yes.
Lorinda Visnick,
Yes.
and Rachel Abel, yes. It's 7-0. Okay, next, Dr. Chiroczek, you're going to provide us with some school updates, an overview of the NEC report, and our FY23 budget process.
All right, thank you. I'm going to share my screen. So I have 3 items on the agenda tonight. The first is just the quick school updates regarding the COVID. We are going to talk a little bit about the NEC annual report that we will go over with you, just an overview. And then an overview of the budget process and what we hope to, how we will be proceeding as we begin to look at the FY23 budget. So first, just a quick, update on the citywide vaccination rates. Each one went up 1%, so we are making progress. We're moving in the right direction. The biggest change is the number of fully vaccinated 5 to 11-year-olds. We held a successful clinic on last Friday. We have another smaller clinic this Friday, so we're continuing to work together, and we will be offering another one later in January. So we continue to move in that direction. I do have updated information for everyone regarding the grades by grade, what the percentage of students per grade is that are vaccinated. And I gotta move this out of the way for myself. You can see that 5th grade, 6th grade are catching up very quickly. Those are our students that have had a little bit of time to catch up with their peers that from 7th through 12th that have been getting vaccinations. 7th and 8th, each number is moving in the right direction. So we continue to work, we continue to provide information to families, and we're working hard to continue to move in that direction for our students. We have, as we do every week on Tuesdays and Fridays, we update the COVID dashboard, tracking the number of active cases that we have going on at the time. You can see our numbers have, been growing as the community numbers have been growing over the past week. Oh, you can't see. I'm sorry. I'm going on and I didn't look up and know that you couldn't
Yeah,
see.
sorry.
That information is available on the dashboard that we have on our district website. I can wait if you want, or I can just,
Jeez.
I'm reading.
I don't know how to get out of this thing. User manual. Let me try each one of these. Shouldn't have- Oh. TV maybe? No.
There we go.
All right.
And a blind squirrel will find a nut once in a while, right?
All right. So I'm not sure where we left off, if it was with the community. Yeah, so this is the community rates citywide, 5 to 11, 12 to 15, 16 to 19. Each one have gone up a little bit. This is our grade level rates. So grades 5 and 6 are newly added to what we've been looking at as we track them. This is data that we have in our MIIS dashboard as well as SNAP. So this is actual counting of actual students in our buildings as they sit in our classes. And you can see our rates are moving in a nice direction. We're seeing rates at the 12th, 10th, 11th, and 12th up in the mid 70s, which is really good. And so we hope to see that continue to move in that positive direction.
Dr. Chiroczek, do you mind reading aloud the grade 11 and 12 numbers? Because
Not at all.
we can't see them because of the
Yeah.
closed captioning.
I'm sorry, yeah, because the closed caption's over it. So grade 11 is fully vaccinated 71.5%, with one dose 73.7%. And grade 12, fully vaccinated is 68.4%, but with at least one dose is 74.9%. So that's encouraging. So seems that a number of our students are out there and in the process of getting their vaccination. So that was good news. The current dashboard, again, these are our current active cases. We change this dashboard every Tuesday and Friday. We like to distribute it so that everyone has some transparency around the different schools and they're able to kind of follow and see what's going on. Again, numbers continue to increase for us as they are across the state and across our city. So this is the daily 7-day data for Beverly. Again, I can read that out, but basically you can still see it. It's 34.09. 4 weeks ago, it was at 72.0 for our average daily incidence rate per 100,000, and that's reflecting the same thing that we're seeing in the schools. Just a reminder of our clinics. So this coming Friday, we have the second dose clinic for students who were vaccinated previously, and that's with our mobile Vaccinate RX provider. And it was those clinics were targeting ages 5 to 11. And again, just a reminder, 5 to 11-year-olds must be accompanied by a parent at the clinic. And then we have set up opportunity for a second set of vaccinations on January 7th from 3:30 to 8. There'll be a first dose and booster. Again, that's Cataldo Ambulance. This is the clinics that we set up through the state. We have to apply through the state, and they contract Cataldo to come, and we offer our facilities for them to use. We're going to target ages 5 to 18 hoping to reach out. And then we will have the second dose clinic on Friday, the 28th, again, 3:30 to 8. So those are the opportunities that we are going to continue to work to provide. Cataldo has been a great partner with us for this. And our last Friday, we probably had 320 students come through for their second dose vaccinations, and it went really well, so.
Thanks. I just had a question. I did have a parent of a third grader reach out to me that said she was interested in getting her daughter vaccinated those days, but she herself isn't vaccinated and was wondering if she'd be able to sign up with that if her daughter got a slot.
So we are targeting ages 5 to 18. They will be providing vaccinations for people that come in. The registration links will be going home via the Connect Ed, and so there'll be slots that they can do that. So, yep, we're encouraging as many people as we can to get vaccinated whenever we can. So that was great. And actually, towards the end of the night, last week, they put out a walk-in sign, and they did have a few people as walk-ins for any of the extra doses that they had because they had finished early. So we also encourage that for anybody that's interested. Again, just remember, a reminder that if you're between the ages of 5 and 11, you have to have a parent accompany you. 12 and up, at minimum, that 12 and up, you can get the vaccination, but part of the registration online is a parental consent, and you will need to have parental consent in order to be vaccinated between the ages of 12 and 8. Back up. Jody, do you have anything you want to offer? Any questions, comments? Oh, she can't. We can't hear you.
I'm going to try to bring her volume up on my computer.
Okay.
Will Kim change something? Maybe we could hear them now. Can we have somebody try?
She doesn't have anything good. Well, thank you, Jody. But thank you for being here. All right. All right. The next thing that I have is our North Shore Education Consortium Annual Report. The North Shore Education Consortium issues an annual report annually, and it's our responsibility to share that out with all of you. I'm actually going to turn it over to Bethany, and Bethany's going to kind of just give you the highlights about, you received the report in your packets, and you may have gotten a hard copy, and if not, and you want one, Donna has them available, but rather than go through the whole report, Bethany's just going to give you the highlights.
Okay, thank you. So we are one of 20 member districts who belong to the consortium, and Beverly represents the 5th largest district in terms of the number of students that are served within the consortium programs. There are currently 8 programs that are run by the consortium that all serve different student needs, and the purpose of this type of programming is to provide cost-effective options for students who require a higher level or more restrictive placement. And as a member of the consortium, we do receive reduced tuition rates. And in addition to that, we also have access to other member services, which includes consulting and job-alike groups, as well as some training opportunities. Currently, the program within the consortium that we access most frequently is the Kevin O'Grady School, but we do have students right now in 6 out of the 8 consortium programs. Any other questions?
Awesome. Thanks, Bethany.
Thank you.
And we are very grateful. Just for any of you that may not know, the superintendents of all of the member districts served as the board, the school committee, so to speak, for the consortium. And so in that role, I sit on that committee and represent Beverly for that. All right. So what I have now is just sort of, this is a walkthrough, just a reminder for most of you. I think everybody has already been part of this. Ken Ann may be the first time for you and Beverly for us, but the budget process and what you can anticipate as we enter into just the very beginning stages of our budget process for FY23. First and foremost, anytime we talk about the budget, the very first thing that we're always going to do, and we will always be going back to, look at what are our goal areas, because one of the most important things in the drafting of a budget is to make sure that it represents what the district goals are and that we're utilizing resources to support the goal areas that we have identified. So just a quick review, these are the 5 goal areas that we have talked about with you in our district improvement plan, and these are what we're working. We utilize this sort of as our roadmap for a lot of the decision making around a lot of things, but very much particularly around what budget decisions we make and where we're spending our money. So first goal is around culturally responsive teaching and social emotional learning. We have been talking lots and lots about that and providing lots of information to the committee about what we mean by that and what it looks like in Beverly and implementation. We have a goal around curriculum review and selection. We've talked a lot about our pilot programs that we have beginning in ELA and the selection process we went through for our math programs. We've talked about looking specifically at making sure that we increase our representation in advanced coursework in our classrooms. We've talked about working on hiring practices, developing and implementing conventions to attract a diverse workforce, but also reducing bias in the hiring process, and recruiting and succession, developing and implementing conventions that not only attracts a diverse workforce, but again, reduces the bias. So these are our goal areas. I just like to keep them at the forefront when we begin any of our discussions. The next thing we always try to consider is what are the factors that are going to impact the FY23 budget as we go through the budget process. So we're very aware that we have contractual obligations. We have completed all of our negotiations with all 6 of our units, which is really exciting. And so that will make our process easier than it has been in the past 2 years, because typically we've been at this stage and we were unaware of what those contractual obligations may be. But now we have a pretty definitive idea of how much that's going to mean. We'll look at enrollments and how the enrollments are going to impact, our resourcing and what we need for the, regular business in our classrooms. Look at Student Opportunity Act, which is what are the incremental increases that we experienced last year in Chapter 70 funding and how does that impact our budget. We're going to look at resourcing for accelerated learning and really the impact that the ESSER grants have on some of the decisions that we're making. And for those of you who are on finance and facilities, Jean gave a great overview of where we are with our ESSER grants and what we're targeting. And then finally, we consider the department funding requests. I'm meeting individually with each building leader and department head to kind of just hear from them what are their needs and what are the requests that they have and asking us to consider. So the way we go through the process, the first step is to identify the priorities of school committee members and stakeholders. I've been meeting individually with each of you. In addition, I've met with the union leadership. We talked about this at our citywide PTO. We've, engaged in conversations throughout that process to identify what are the priorities for Beverly in the coming year. We'll collaborate with the principals in the central office to sort of develop a shared framework. We take that information from all the stakeholders and look, what are these priorities and how do they align with the goals? We look to identify administrative efficiencies and restructuring opportunities. We always do that. I think that's going to be critical, particularly as we've had the sort of opportunity to explore what additional resourcing would look like through some of the ESSER funding. And so what are the what are we going to identify that is going to be crucial to retain, and what sorts of efficiencies will we have to create in order to make room for that when the federal stimulus money is no longer, our federal money is no longer available. We assess our enrollments and we look at the impact on staffing. We review requests from the funding departments. So what is it transportation needs? Are there areas in some of our departments, buildings and grounds? And then finally, collaborate with the city to determine the proposed city contribution in relationship to the school budget. So these are the steps we've been, I think we've worked through this process for a few years together. But I just wanted to kind of give you that update to give you that reminder. Again, these meetings have been scheduled. I tried to begin a little sooner this year, so we began on December 6th, and we've got meetings scheduled throughout the 23rd to kind of just have those conversations and discussions and begin to get our information gathered. Jean, this evening with the Finance and Facilities Department, Finance and Facilities Committee introduced the budget calendar, so we had a look at what is this timeline. This calendar and developing this calendar involves some regulatory requirements for Jean to identify, and we sometimes work backwards, so to speak. So we know we have to hold a public hearing. We know we have to bring the budget information forward. So this is the calendar that we hope to kind of work our way through in order to make sure that we're on target with our process. And then we take a look at enrollments. And so I'm giving you just a quick snapshot of where we are with enrollments this year. I typically don't show 4 years in succession, but given that the 2 years in between prior to this year have been very disruptive, I think it's pretty important for us to kind of think about what do our enrollments look like. I was really surprised at how stable our enrollments are. I think that we noticed that we had peak numbers in FY20. That was just before the pandemic. We know that we know that a number of families have chosen to homeschool during this time. So we know there are some families that are still, they either have decided that that's working for their family, or they're still home waiting for the opportunity to return. But in general, our numbers are actually really strong, considering. And so we anticipate, this is current enrollments as of today, actually, the FY22, maybe Monday, numbers. That's how many elementary students are sitting in our classrooms, 1,807. And you can see the grade level configurations. Our kindergarten numbers are lower than we would have anticipated. That's probably the grade that we've seen the biggest decrease in. And so we're mindful that many of those students may be homeschooled and be home. Remember, kindergarten is not mandatory in Massachusetts. So we're keeping an eye on the fact that there may be some 30 or 40 kindergartners that will show up in first grade that we haven't anticipated. So that's one thing. And that those first grade numbers are actually pretty high for us. So we know that we have a high number of first graders. And that was the grade level. If you remember last year, we utilized ESSER funding to add additional classroom teachers in each building to keep sort of the numbers somewhat down. And so those are the elementary numbers. These are what our middle school numbers are looking like. We have 1421 right now enrolled in our middle school across the 5 grades. The 4 grades are actually pretty consistent in their size. Our larger grades are in the 7th and 8th grade, with a little bit smaller numbers in our 5th and 6th. And then in our high school, we have 1,286. And that, you can see the grade sizes there, the configuration. Our seniors class is the largest in a long time, and our other classes sort of vary. We also look at our preschool numbers, and as you can see, our preschool numbers are way up after a dip in 21 during the pandemic. So we have a number of students that are attending our preschool. I think that was reflected in Jean's report earlier tonight around preschool tuitions. We were fortunate to get a number of students back in. Our out-of-district numbers are lower significantly. Bethany and the special education staff is doing a great job working really hard to keep our students in district. I'll just remind you that in order to bring them back, we create programming, and so we're working really hard to make sure that we have the programs to support students so that when we bring them back, they have the supports that they need in order to be successful. And then our homeschool numbers, which typically are in the mid-70s, peaked at 168 last year, and now we sit at 105 for homeschool. So that we know of, those are homeschool families that have registered with us. Just a reminder about the Student Opportunity Act. We do have commitments around the Student Opportunity Act. I'm attending a webinar tomorrow to talk about what we're doing on our amendment. The Student Opportunity funding that Beverly receives is actually the minimum amount of funding that a district can get. It's $30 per pupil. That's the minimum bar that was set. We don't qualify for any more or a large amount, but we do still have some requirements around it in terms of our programming and what we use, and so there's some reporting that I have to do. The Student Opportunity funding is incorporated into the Chapter 70 funding, and you can get an estimate of what it is by looking at the difference between your incremental increase that you received in Chapter 70 funding last year. So just to get us started and just to get us thinking, what are those contractual obligations? We know that we have a 2.25% increase that we have negotiated with the teachers, and it's pretty much across the board with all of our staff. So that is $1,751,000. We anticipate teachers in there and paras in any of our units that do step, that we would have $639,185 increase in steps. Again, the lanes is 180. We've used that number. It typically holds up for us pretty well. Might be a little over, a little under, but it's worked as a pretty good benchmark number for us in terms of that. And then finally, our healthcare increase, and we are utilizing the 3%. That's typically what we do on an annual basis, at least at the beginning, unless we hear different from Bryant. And so that's a number that we like to at least start with when we start thinking about these numbers. And just as a reminder, the last two budgets that we had, I thought it would be helpful for you to be able to see. Our FY21 final budget appropriation was $63,285,805. That consisted of a city contribution of $53,163,75, and our Chapter 70 funding in FY21 was $10,125,430. Our final budget appropriation in FY22 was $65,376,407. That was a city contribution of $54,785,483, and our final Chapter 70 money that we received in FY22 was $10,599,014. I referred earlier to the incremental increase, so you can see the difference between $10,125,000 and $10,590,000, and that increase does represent that Student Opportunity Act funding and/or increases in enrollment. And finally, just a reminder about the legislative process. So we don't know when we'll have the final numbers on Chapter 70 for FY23, but we do know that typically we hear from the governor and what the governor's proposed budget is in January. House Ways and Means budget comes out in April. The Senate budget comes out in May, and then we typically by then know what our final Chapter 70 money is sometime in the beginning of June. So that's just laying out the kind of roadmap for what we'll be doing and where we'll be going. And so I guess I would just see if there's any questions.
Ms. Visnick.
I have a question, but well, I guess the start of my question is to you, Ms. Abel. I thought that I had asked for something to be on the agenda. And so the combination of I don't think I see it on the agenda, and we still don't have new business back on the agenda, which I would hope our body would speak about at some point in time, returning our agenda to the old format. I don't know where to begin. How about, is there an item on the agenda? Am I missing what I thought I expected to see?
Dr. Chiroczek and I didn't speak again before the meeting when the agenda got posted. For school updates, I think Ms. Visnick is referring to calendars.
Oh, the school calendar updates and the conversation and discussion around when we would be looking at those and what we might be including in those?
Maybe. Yes.
Okay.
How about we start with that? Yes.
Okay. I'm looking to Ms. Abel for direct. You want me to just have to kind of bring that forward as part of the school update?
Yes, please.
Okay. So, how to do this? Okay, so I think rather than leave you all guessing as to what in the world we're talking about, I think one of the things that we had discussed in terms of coming forward with the school calendar for next year. I know that there are people that are wondering about the school calendar, and I had said originally, sometimes we vote on it in this meeting, sometimes it's in January, but I think we had said that we were going to hold off because we wanted to make sure that we had the opportunity to have a discussion or conversation around the use of time, and is there any opportunities to think differently about how we could look at our calendar to provide opportunities for collaboration for teachers. And one of the ideas and thoughts was that we might consider utilizing a structure similar to what we did during last year, in which there were some early release days that were designated for teacher collaboration. And, you know, right now, just for reference, we have 4 early release days that are built into the school calendar that are reflected for teacher collaboration, and 1 day that is around Thanksgiving, which is, it's not a time for working. So I think the question is there an appetite for exploration around whether or not more early release days might be beneficial and might be something that we would think about implementing or building into the new calendar? And I guess I would pose that as a question to start the conversation.
Ms. Visnick.
Thank you. Yes, that was awesome. So thank you, and thank you. So yes, I would like to trundle down that path. I would like if we could have some of that discussion at this table. I mentioned at our last meeting that I think that there is an incredible burden. There's a lot of stress on our staff. You don't have to look very far to see that not just our neighboring communities, but districts across the United States are trying to figure out how to keep staff from leaving the field of education. A great article about the fact that in Detroit they have every single Friday off. It's just off. It's not an early release. It is just a day off. And yes, that is an incredible burden on the parents. But at the same time, if we don't take care of our staff, then what kind of quality of an education are the children getting when they are in school? And so we talked about this on more than one occasion. At FNF earlier this evening, we talked about the fact that we're short on subs, we're short on paras, and the net, a meeting ago, Dr. Chiroczek, you talked about the fact that you gave a big tip of the cap to the fact that the staff in this building is in essence, you know, doing, I don't want to use policing, but they're helping to try to lower the vandalism rates, right? Whether it's because of TikTok or whatever. And so we're asking more and more out of our teachers. There's a staff shortage, and I think we need to really talk about that and talk about the mental health of our staff and what we can do. You know, if the paras are going into the classrooms to cover a shortage of subs, then that means any given teacher doesn't have the supports in their classroom. So that's like one more thing we're asking them to do. And then the totality of that is, I think if we could do something to give the teachers some time back, and I'll give you a very tangible example, it would be helpful. And the very tangible example is that I got more than one phone call from a constituent saying they were going in to meet with their teacher and they didn't know what their children's grades were. The grades hadn't been entered in, and it wasn't the we lost our grades thing, which we didn't really lose, but that's my terminology. I apologize. But you know what I'm talking about. I emailed you that. So the teachers, for whatever reason, you know, any given teacher didn't have all their grades in because they're doing so many other things. And so it's just a big totality of things. If we can name that, acknowledge that it's happening, and figure out a way to try to take care of our teachers, knowing that they too are under a decent amount of additional stress, then I think we should be doing that. There, I've started the conversation. I would even go so far as to make a motion that we should modify the calendar. And we should modify the calendar in order to try to help our teachers, give them some time back. And I will very upfront say that there's a logistical issue, because if I'm a parent of a young child, I maybe can't take that afternoon off to accept my child home early. So the hurdle for our group will be, how do we handle that logistical Problem, do we have the funds to do it? I think the answer to that is absolutely. I think using our ESSER funds in this way would be acceptable. Then it's who can we get in the community, partner-wise or otherwise, to help us take those children who can't go home early on those days, right? I don't think we want to keep every single child at school, but there will be parents who say, I can't take my child home early. Right, so I believe that's the biggest hurdle to get over, to say, can we do this to take care of our staff so that our staff is best prepared to take care of our children the way we want them and need them to take care of our children.
Kendall?
Thanks, Madam President. Could I ask, Mrs. Visnick, are you talking about looking ahead to next school year's calendar solely, or also looking at the spring calendar?
Yes,
Yes to both?
yes, sir.
So I think for the body, I think we need some more data about what the time on learning requirements are for our students. Look at the calendar. I think Dr. Chiroczek has explained that we have a bunch of early release days coming up in our spring calendar already, and understanding what this potential motion really looks like in execution. And then I think you were looking for community partners to provide after-school care. Is that?
Right, I think there has to be a scoping, right? And I am sensitive to the fact that we don't want to poll, right? We don't want to keep surveying parents. You know, the discussion has to start. We have to have the discussion. How many days would there be? What makes sense? And for those days, I don't know, pick a number just for the sake of conversation. Let's say that number was just 2. For those 2 days, how many children would we want to try to help accommodate? So, for instance, if it's an early release day, my child can come home, and my child could have come home at any age because I work from home almost always, right? But I understand that's not the case for everybody else. We already take care of some number of children after school, so there will be a gap there, and an additional number of some children, and we need to scope that in order to determine how many extra children would we need to take care of for those extra 2 hours, those early release 2 hours, so that from the parents' perspective, those parents who can't have their children come home early would have care for their children. And then we can try to figure out, I say we, that burden would really be on that side of that part of the room right over there. How can we make that happen, right? Can the YMCA, they're our existing partner, can they help us? Is that enough? Do we put the children on the bus to go to the Y to do activities? Do we have more staff from the Y come into our buildings, right? This is like time to put on our creativity hats, because in the meantime, any given day, we don't have enough teachers in our buildings today. That is 1,000% affecting our students today. And it's not going to get any better all by itself. I think we have to talk about it, and we have to try to do something.
Would this be a topic for our curriculum instruction and student life in the new year? Our first meeting would be the 12th of January. Could we ask for Dr. Flaherty maybe to do a presentation on our time on learning requirements and our calendar and our staffing? I don't know how we can survey the families and get people's emotions up either way.
Right. I think that's a great start. That would be a great start, sure.
Dr. Flaherty, you okay with putting some
I think
data
examining
together?
the time on learning, first of all, at all 3 levels, because it varies whether you're K to 8 or whether because we do, ours is officially an elementary schedule for the middle, but the high school has a different set of time on learning, and we talked a little bit about that. And I think that, we can certainly take a look at that. I think also clearly defining, so we've had a lot of conversations, we had a conversation in our meeting that we had, and I think, the scope of caring for the students, that time between early release and home, that I would need a lot more information and thinking about the ideas, because just the function of staffing, supervision, space, all of those things. So that would take more, and it would be, what did you say, to putting our imagination hats on or something like that? Like, it would take a lot of, I'm not sure what that would look like. And I also think, understanding better the scope. So because one of the things I know we have is we have the 4 days that are already built in. And so what is the number that we're looking at? And time on learning figures will tell us what kind of leeway we have and what we would be looking at. So I think that would be a good start. Yeah, Dot does too.
Okay, so we'll have that on our January 12th CISL.
Ms. Coelho has her hand up, but I have a question about that. But can you go to Ms. Coelho first,
Ms.
please?
Coelho.
I think Lorinda's idea is a great idea. I mean, growing up, I grew up in Hamilton, Wenham, and every Wednesday we got out a half a day on Wednesdays. And if the weather was bad, we'd stay inside and play if we didn't get to go home. I was fortunate enough to have Bob Stanley live in my town, so him and his wife would volunteer to have the kids during nice weather go out, play kickball, do baseball teams and stuff like that. We could get our gym teachers to do stuff like that on Wednesdays if it's possible. Their school year, I think, literally only started 1 week before ours and ended the same time. And I have several friends who still live in Hamilton, Wenham, and say that they still do half days on Wednesdays, and the school year is about the same for the teachers.
Thank you, Ms. Coelho. And Ms. Bisnick, you had a follow-up question?
I do. I'm wondering, I'm wondering, because we have to reconfigure ourselves on January 3rd. So that does not affect does that have any effect on us putting something on the agenda of the curriculum, the curriculum meeting, right?
We would configure on Monday, the 3rd, and so the appointed chair would have until really the Friday morning to work with Dr. Flaherty on posting the agenda. But I think the work needs to start after tonight to get some of the data information pulled together. So regardless of who the chair is, I guess whoever the chair of the CISL would be, sort of put on point or on notice right now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Were there any other questions related to Dr. Chiroczek's report on the FY23 budget process or any other school updates? I'm not seeing any hands. Dr. McKenzie, you're all set? Okay. In terms of the chair's updates, this concludes our regularly scheduled committee meetings for the 2021 calendar year. There's possibly going to be one policy subcommittee meeting if we can get our calendar to work next week, but I'm being hopeful. I'd have to post it tomorrow or Friday morning at the latest. So we'll put our calendars together after the meeting to see if we can clean up some of that before we go into our next organization. And so then January 3rd, we have inauguration at the high school in the auditorium. I believe that is at noon. 12 noon. We arrived just a little early to get our spots there. And then that evening at 7 p.m., we'll come back to this room to do our organizational meeting. Okay, the last item before we go to executive session is the approval of the FY23 through FY25 contract between the Beverly School Committee and the Superintendent, Dr. Suzanne Chiroczek. As a reminder, the first contract is set to expire on June 30th, 2022. And therefore, we as a committee had agreed to enter into a successor agreement. And primarily, the changes are with the salary and the dates on the contract. We had a small addition with the new Juneteenth federal holiday, and we removed the new superintendent program clause. So looking for a motion to approve?
I'd like to make that motion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Milady.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Coelho. Not sure if we have any conversation. I tried to highlight the changes. Okay, we will do a roll call vote again by alphabet. Mayor Cahill,
Yes.
Ms. Coelho,
Yes.
Dr. McKenzie. She's saying yes. Mr. Milady,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson,
Yes.
Ms. Visnick,
Yes.
and Ms. Abel, yes. Passes 7-0. And then now the chair will call to move to meet in executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, for purposes 2 and 3, and not to return to open session. Purpose 2 is to discuss strategy in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel or to conduct collective bargaining with non-union personnel. And purpose 3 is to discuss strategy with respect to and in preparation for collective bargaining with union personnel, because an open discussion may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the committee. I have made that motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. And again, we will do a roll call vote. Mayor Cahill,
Yes.
Ms. Coelho,
Yes.
Dr. McKenzie? Yes. Mr. Milady,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson,
Yes.
Ms. Visnick?
Yes.
And Ms. Abel, yes. 7-0. The time is 8:25 p.m. Thank you, BevCam, as always, for broadcasting us. We will not be returning to open session. I will get this recording stopped, and we'll see you in the new year. Yeah, we'll just have her on my computer.